The station lights dimmed slowly, shifting from bright white to a soft blue that marked the beginning of the station's night cycle. Elias Ward was still awake. He sat alone in his small apartment, a cup of cold tea forgotten on the table beside him. Outside the wide window, ships drifted past in calm, silent lines, their hulls glowing with symbols from dozens of alien cultures. Elias had lived on Kepri Station for 6 years, yet moments like this still made him feel small. A single human surrounded by the weight of an entire galaxy. A soft chime echoed through the room. Elias frowned. Official messages were rare at this hour. He stood, straightened his jacket out of habit and tapped the wall panel. The hologram flickered to life. Elias Ward, the station AI said in its neutral tone. You are requested to attend a legal convocation at the Hall of Concordance. Attendance is mandatory. Elias blinked. Legal convocation? For what reason? There is no further information available, the AI replied. Transportation has been arranged. The hologram vanished. Elias stood there for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. He had no enemies, no debts, no unfinished contracts. He was a cultural liaison, a quiet job that involved translation, etiquette advice, and long meetings where humans were rarely taken seriously. Then a single name surfaced in his thoughts. Valor. No, Elias said softly, though the room did not answer. Valor had been his friend. Not a colleague, not a client. A friend. An alien trader from a long-lived species, careful with his words and patient with human questions. They met years ago during a failed negotiation that ended with both of them sharing cheap station food and laughing at how little their governments trusted one another. Valor had taught Elias how to read alien expressions. Elias had taught Valor how humans used humor to survive stress. They spoke often, they argued sometimes, and they trusted each other in a way that felt rare out here. But Valor had not answered Elias' last message. The transport arrived quietly. Elias barely noticed the journey. His thoughts stayed locked on memories. Valor's calm voice, the way his eyes shifted color when he was amused, the careful way he spoke about tradition and duty. The Hall of Concordance was old, even by alien standards. Its walls curved inward, carved with symbols from civilizations that no longer existed. Elias felt out of place the moment he stepped inside. Several figures waited for him. At the center stood a tall alien legal arbiter, its form wrapped in ceremonial cloth. To one side sat two witnesses. To the other stood a figure Elias recognized instantly. She was Valor's wife. She stood perfectly still, her posture flawless. Her skin shimmered faintly under the hall lights, patterned with markings Elias had only seen in old cultural records. Her eyes rested on him, unreadable. Elias swallowed. The arbiter spoke. Elias Ward of Earth, you are present to receive notification of inheritance. The word hit him harder than he expected. Inheritance, Elias repeated. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, the arbiter replied. Valor of the Tethri line has formally passed beyond biological function. His final legal declaration has been verified. Elias felt the room tilt. Valor was gone, truly gone. No messages missed, no misunderstanding of time cycles. Gone, the widow inclined her head slightly. Not a greeting, not a farewell, something between, the arbiter continued. By the terms of Tethri succession law, Valor named you his primary inheritor. The hall went silent. Elias laughed once, sharp and short. That's impossible. I'm not family, I'm not even his species. Correct, the arbiter said, which is precisely why the designation is valid. Elias stared. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense under Tethri custom, the arbiter replied. A neutral inheritor is chosen when internal conflict is expected. A trusted outsider ensures continuity. Elias felt cold. Continuity of what? The arbiter raised one long, thin limb and data bloomed into the air. Assets, trade routes, holdings. Entire economic networks stretched across systems Elias had never even visited. The numbers were beyond comprehension. Elias took a step back. This is wrong. I can't. There is more, the arbiter said calmly. Elias turned slowly. Along with material assets, the arbiter continued, you are designated steward of Vaylor's household and bound partner to his surviving spouse. The words echoed, bound partner. Elias looked at her. She met his gaze without emotion. I what? Elias said. That's not there has to be a way out of that. There is, the arbiter replied. Refusal. Elias exhaled in relief. However, the arbiter added, refusal would dissolve the estate, collapse multiple trade agreements, and place the widow under custodial governance of the high houses. The widow's eyes flickered for the first time. Elias understood enough alien politics to know what that meant. Loss of autonomy, loss of voice, a quiet life under constant supervision. He felt sick. Vaylor had known this, he must have known. Elias rubbed his face with both hands. He never told me. He was not permitted to, the arbiter said, nor would it align with Tethri belief. The test lies in the choice. Elias lowered his hands. You're saying he trusted me to decide. Yes, the widow finally spoke. Her voice was smooth, controlled, and distant. Vaylor believed humans were capable of compassion without obligation. Elias looked at her. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for your loss. She studied him as if weighing something unseen. Grief is private, she replied, but your presence is noted. The arbiter waited. Elias thought of Vaylor's patience, his quiet belief in humans, his belief in Elias. I won't let everything he built be destroyed, Elias said, and I won't agree to something that harms you. The widow's eyes narrowed slightly. Not anger, curiosity. So I accept the inheritance, Elias continued, but only as steward, not owner. And any partnership will be discussed, not assumed. The hall remained silent. The arbiter considered him. Your conditions are unconventional. Elias gave a weak smile. I'm human. After a long pause, the arbiter inclined its head. The declaration stands. The estate transfers at dawn cycle. Just like that, Elias Ward became one of the most powerful individuals on the station. The widow turned and walked away without another word. Later, Elias stood alone in the corridor, his hands shaking. The weight of what had happened pressed down on him. He had wanted a quiet life. He had wanted simple work and honest conversations. Vaylor had given him anything but. A final message arrived on his personal device, time-stamped weeks earlier. Vaylor's voice filled the air. My friend, it said gently, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. Forgive me for the burden, but I needed someone who would see people before power. I needed a human. Elias closed his eyes. The station lights dimmed further, and for the first time since arriving among the stars, Elias realized something terrifying and incredible. The galaxy had just made a mistake, and humanity was about to be noticed. The transfer of authority did not feel real to Elias at first. The next station cycle began like any other, with low hums in the walls and distant ship traffic passing beyond the habitat ring. Yet everything had changed. Elias stood in a wide chamber that once belonged to Vaylor. It was not a bedroom or an office, but something between the two. Smooth stone walls curved gently upward, etched with patterns that told family history, trade oaths, and personal philosophy. Elias could not read most of it, but he felt the weight of meaning in the space. Behind him, attendants waited in respectful silence. They were not servants in the human sense. They were household members bound by tradition, contract, and loyalty to the estate. Their eyes followed Elias carefully, measuring every movement, every breath. He hated that. Elias shifted his hands into his pockets to stop them from shaking. You don't have to stand like that, he said. I'm not used to this. One of the attendants, an older being with silver-toned skin, inclined their head. We stand as tradition requires, steward. The word still felt wrong. Elias sighed. All right, at least sit, please. There was a pause, then slowly they complied. Across the chamber, the widow observed everything in silence. She had arrived earlier without announcement, her presence calm and controlled. She wore formal garments now, layered and symbolic, marking her status as both widow and political figure. Elias had read enough cultural briefings to know the meaning, but knowing did not make it easier. She spoke at last. You alter household behavior within a single cycle. I didn't mean to, Elias said. I just don't like people standing around me like I'm about to judge them. Her eyes focused on him. Judgment is expected. That doesn't mean it's right. A faint pause followed. In your culture, she said, authority is uncomfortable. Elias gave a small, tired smile. Authority should always be uncomfortable, otherwise people forget what it's for. The widow studied him again, this time longer. Her name was Lurith. Elias had learned it from the legal documents, though no one had spoken it aloud yet. In her culture, names carried weight, and to speak them too freely could imply ownership or intimacy. Elias did neither. They walked together through the estate chambers, escorted at a distance by advisors and legal observers. Everywhere they went, Elias felt eyes on him. Word had already spread. The human inheritor, the outsider, the mistake. At a council chamber overlooking the trade docks, they stopped. Lurith gestured toward the stars beyond the glass. These roots, she said, feed 12 systems. Your signature now holds them together. Elias swallowed. I don't plan to change anything suddenly. That itself is a change, she replied. They sat at opposite ends of a long table. Data projections flickered to life between them, filling the air with shifting symbols and numbers. One by one, representatives joined the meeting remotely. Faces of many species appeared, some curious, some amused, some openly dismissive. Elias recognized the tone immediately. He had seen it his whole career. The tone that said, "This will be easy." A tall, sharp-featured trader spoke first. Steward Ward, we offer condolences for your sudden elevation. Elias nodded. Thank you, the trader continued. As you are no doubt overwhelmed, my house proposes temporary oversight of Veiler's outer contracts until you are better prepared. Temporary oversight, a polite phrase for takeover. Elias glanced at Lurith. She did not react. He looked back at the trader. Which contracts? The trader smiled. Those involving mineral transport from the Illis corridor. Elias tapped the data. Those contracts include labor protections negotiated by Veiler personally. Yes, the trader said smoothly, protections that slow production. Elias leaned forward slightly. They prevent deaths. A ripple of mild amusement passed through several representatives. Lurith watched closely. Elias continued. Veiler believed stability came from fairness. I agree with him. The contracts stand. The trader's smile faded. You may not understand the economic pressure involved. I understand people, Elias replied, and I understand what happens when you treat them like expendable parts. Silence followed. The trader stiffened. Are you refusing? Yes, Elias said calmly. And I'm also opening a review into transport safety across all routes. More murmurs, more surprise. The meeting ended shortly after with no agreements reached. When the projections faded, Elias leaned back and exhaled slowly. That was unwise, Lurith said. Probably, Elias admitted, but it felt necessary. You have made powerful enemies. I didn't insult them, Elias said. I just didn't let them win. Lurith considered this. You speak as though conflict is avoidable. It usually is, Elias said, if you listen. They left the chamber together. As they walked, Lurith spoke again. You do not behave as Veiler predicted. Elias smiled sadly. He always thought I was better than I am. No, she said. He believed humans were unpredictable because they prioritize feeling over structure. And that's bad. In my culture, it is dangerous. They stopped at a quiet balcony overlooking the inner ring of the station. Lights glowed softly below, thousands of lives moving in patterns too complex to control completely. Lurith folded her hands. You accepted a bond you do not want. I accepted responsibility, Elias said, not ownership. Others will not see the difference. I know. She turned to face him fully now. Then why do it? Elias thought of Vaylor's message, of trust, of choice. Because if I didn't, he said, everything he cared about would become a tool for people who don't care at all. Larith searched his face. And me? Elias met her gaze. You're not part of an estate, you're a person, and you deserve choice. For the first time since they met, Larith's composure cracked, just slightly. Choice was not a word often offered to her. Later that cycle, reports flooded in. Challenges, delays, subtle resistance from houses testing boundaries. Elias read everyone, asking questions, requesting context, refusing to rush decisions. He did not sleep. Neither did Larith. They crossed paths again near the household archive. She watched him review records, his brow furrowed in concentration. You exhaust yourself, she said. So do you, Elias replied without looking up. She hesitated. In my culture, grief is controlled. In mine, Elias said softly, it's shared. She said nothing, but she did not leave. As the station lights dimmed once more, something began to shift, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Word spread that the human steward listened, that he asked names, that he remembered faces, that he did not raise his voice. And that made the galaxy uneasy, because power that did not behave like power was hard to predict. And humans had just introduced something new into an old system, not force, but empathy. The third cycle began with pressure, not loud pressure, not threats or shouting. This kind of pressure was quiet, polite, and constant. Messages arrived one after another, each carefully written, each pretending to be helpful. Trade houses offered advice. Advisors suggested shortcuts. Legal teams warned of risks Elias had surely not considered. Elias read them all. He sat in the central office of the estate, a place that once belonged to Vaylor. The desk was wide and smooth, shaped for alien hands, but Elias had learned where to place his arms so he would not feel awkward. Data screens floated around him, showing routes, names, and obligations that stretched across the stars. He felt very small. Across the room, Larith stood near the window, watching the station traffic. She spent more time there now, observing, listening, thinking. Elias noticed that she no longer avoided him, though she still kept a careful distance. You are being tested, she said without turning around. I figured, Elias replied. Feels like everyone is poking me with a stick to see what happens. In my culture, Larith said, they would already have moved against you. Elias glanced up. And here, they are unsure, she said. That troubles them. Elias smiled faintly. Good. A soft chime interrupted them. One of the attendants entered, carrying a tablet. Steward, a delegation from the Korath Guild requests immediate audience. Larith turned. The Korath do not request, she said. They demand. Elias accepted the tablet. Then today they can practice asking. Larith watched him closely as he stood. You enjoy this? No, Elias said honestly, but I won't let them bully people just because I'm human. The meeting took place in a smaller chamber, intentionally chosen by Elias. He had learned that space mattered. Large rooms made people feel powerful. Smaller rooms forced them to pay attention. The Korath delegation arrived in perfect formation, their posture sharp, their expressions controlled. Their leader spoke first. Steward Ward, the Korath said. Your recent changes to transport oversight have reduced our profit margin. Elias nodded. They have increased worker survival rates. Survival is assumed, the Korath replied. Efficiency is valued. Not at the cost of lives, Elias said simply. The Korath leaned forward. You are temporary. Elias did not react. Everyone is. A pause followed. Larith, standing behind him, felt something unfamiliar. Pride. The Korath straightened. We will take our business elsewhere. Elias shrugged. That's your choice, but our routes will not change. The delegation left without another word. When the door closed, Elias let out a slow breath. That could have gone worse. Lilith tilted her head. You did not yield. No, Elias said, but I didn't fight either. Your methods confuse them. They confuse me too, Elias admitted. Over the next cycles, the pattern continued. Elias refused exploitative deals. He approved repairs others considered wasteful. He asked questions no one expected from someone in his position. Why are workers rotated so quickly? Why are medical facilities limited on long routes? Why are penalties harsher for failure than rewards for success? Each question slowed processes. Each delay frustrated powerful figures. And yet something strange happened. Productivity improved. Not immediately, not everywhere. But where conditions changed, fewer accidents occurred. Fewer disputes delayed shipments. Trust replaced fear slowly, carefully. Reports reflected this shift. Lilith reviewed them in silence, her fingers tracing lines of data. This should not work, she said finally. Elias looked up from his own screen. But it does. It defies centuries of practice, she said. Maybe centuries of practice weren't perfect, Elias replied gently. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, not as a steward, not as a human curiosity, but as a person shaping something new. You treat power as responsibility, she said, not as privilege. That's how we're taught, Elias said, at least how we try to be. One cycle later, an unexpected request arrived. A mid-level trade house asked for direct alignment with the estate, not a merger, not control, partnership. Lilith read the request twice. They are choosing you, Elias frowned. Why? Because you are predictable, she said. In a way they understand. He laughed softly. No one has ever called me that. They know you will listen, Lilith continued, and that you will keep your word. The alliance was accepted. Others followed. Not the strongest houses, not the oldest, but smaller groups, independent traders, worker collectives. Those tired of being crushed between giants. Elias met them all. He learned names. He remembered stories. He made mistakes and corrected them openly. He apologized when he was wrong. This unsettled the station. Power was not supposed to apologize. One evening, Elias found Lilith in the archive chamber, standing before a projection of Vaylor's personal records. She did not turn when he entered. I think he planned this, she said quietly. Elias joined her. Planned what? You, she said. This disruption. Elias swallowed. He believed in humanity too much. Lilith shook her head slowly. He believed in contrast, in what happens when something flexible enters something rigid. They stood in silence. Do you regret it? Elias asked. Being tied to this, Lilith considered the question. I regret many things, she said, but not watching this change. That night the estate received formal notice. An ancient house, powerful and respected, requested mediation under Elias' authority. Lilith stiffened when she read the name. They do not submit lightly. Then why now? Elias asked. Because refusal would make them look afraid, she said. Elias smiled faintly. Guess we're doing something right. The mediation was tense but calm. Elias listened more than he spoke. He allowed silence. He let both sides feel heard. When it ended, no one was fully satisfied, which meant it was fair. Afterward, Lilith walked beside him through a quiet corridor. You are changing how others view humans, she said. That's dangerous, Elias replied. Yes, she agreed, and necessary. They stopped near a wide viewport. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. For the first time, Lilith said, I am not certain what my future must be. Elias turned to her. That scares you. It does, she admitted, but it also feels lighter. Elias nodded. Choice can do that. Behind them, unseen but felt, the station continued to hum, and across the trade networks a quiet realization began to spread. The human was not weak, he was different. And difference in a stagnant galaxy was the most powerful force of all. The notice arrived at the start of the next cycle, quiet but heavy with meaning. It was not marked urgent, yet everyone who saw it understood its weight. The ceremonial bond would be enacted in 7 cycles. Elias read the message 3 times, even though the words did not change. Around him, the estate moved with careful calm. Advisors spoke in lowered tones. Attendants adjusted schedules. Observers from distant houses quietly updated their records. Larith stood across the room, her expression unreadable. "So it's decided," Elias said at last. "It was always decided," Larith replied. "The delay was courtesy, not choice." Elias leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. 7 cycles isn't much time. "It is more than most receive," she said. He looked at her then. "Is this what you want?" Larith did not answer immediately. She walked to the window, watching ships pass in slow arcs of light. "In my culture," she said, "want is irrelevant. Stability matters. Continuity matters." "And you?" Elias asked gently. She was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know how to answer that anymore." The days that followed were filled with preparation, not just for the ceremony but for the reaction it would cause. Messages poured in from across the network. Some congratulated, some warned, some asked careful questions that were really thinly veiled threats. Elias read them all. He did not reply to most. Instead, he worked. He finalized cooperative charters. He ensured protections were locked into law, not tradition. He transferred authority where possible, decentralizing power so no single house could undo what had been built. Larith watched all of this with growing tension. "You are dismantling safeguards," she said one evening as they reviewed documents together. "I'm removing single points of failure," Elias replied. "You are making yourself less important." "That's the idea," he said. She studied him. "Most would cling to this position." "I never wanted it," Elias said honestly. "I just don't want to waste it." The subject they avoided pressed closer with each passing cycle. The bond. In public, it was treated as symbolic, a formal union to preserve legacy and authority. In private, it was something else entirely, a question. On the 4th cycle, Elias finally spoke it aloud. "I won't go through with it if you don't want to." Larith froze. They were alone in the quiet archive chamber, surrounded by records of centuries-old decisions made without consent. "You cannot refuse," she said. "I can," Elias replied. "I won't stop the estate from continuing, but I won't bind you to something you didn't choose." Her voice tightened. "Refusal would mark me as unstable." "Then we rewrite the terms," Elias said. She turned sharply. "That is not how this works." "It can be," he said calmly, "if we agree." Larith stared at him, something fierce and uncertain behind her eyes. "You would challenge doctrine." "I already have," Elias said. "This would just make it official." Silence stretched between them. "Why?" she asked at last. Elias thought carefully before answering. "Because humans believe partnership means standing beside someone, not owning them." Larith's breath caught just slightly. The next cycle, Elias called a private council, not the full assembly. Only key legal observers, cultural historians, and neutral arbiters. Larith stood with him. Elias spoke plainly. He explained that the bond would proceed but not as tradition demanded. There would be no transfer of ownership, no enforced hierarchy. The bond would be symbolic and contractual, not personal unless both chose otherwise. The room reacted exactly as expected. Shock, confusion, anger. "This undermines centuries of law," one observer said. "It evolves it," Elias replied. "This weakens authority," another argued. "It shares it," Elias said. Larith spoke then, her voice steady. "I consent to this arrangement." That silence was deeper than any before. The arbiters withdrew to deliberate. When they returned, their ruling was cautious but clear. The bond would proceed under revised terms, not because Elias demanded it, but because Larith agreed. Across the station, reaction was immediate. Some houses withdrew support, others watched closely. A few quietly expressed approval. The ceremony itself was simple, no grand display, no excessive ritual, just acknowledgement witnessed and recorded. Elias stood beside Larith, not ahead of her. When the words were spoken, they were neutral, precise, and carefully chosen. No vows of obedience, no claims of possession, only recognition of shared stewardship. When it ended, nothing dramatic happened. No cheers, no outrage. Just a shift. In the cycles that followed, the effect became clear. Other bonded houses began to request similar revisions, quietly at first, then openly. Traditions once considered unchangeable were suddenly being questioned. Lurith noticed the difference most of all. She walked the estate without escorts now. She spoke freely. She argued openly in councils, and she laughed once softly at something Elias said without meaning to. That moment unsettled her more than any political upheaval. "You are changing me," she said later. "I don't want to," Elias replied. "I just want you to be yourself." She looked at him for a long time. "I am not sure who that is yet." "That's okay," Elias said. "Most humans take a lifetime to figure it out." The pressure did not disappear. Powerful figures pushed back. Legal challenges surfaced. Subtle resistance continued. But something had shifted too deeply to reverse. The estate no longer revolved around a single figure. It moved like a network, flexible, adaptive, human. One evening, Lurith joined Elias on the balcony overlooking the station. "The observers are worried," she said. "They always are," Elias replied. "They believe this will spread." He smiled faintly. "So do I," she turned toward him. "And what of us?" Elias hesitated. "We take it one cycle at a time." Lurith considered this. "That is not how my people plan." "It's how we live," Elias said. She looked out at the stars, then back at him. "Then perhaps I will try living." Below them, the station lights glowed steadily. Above them, the galaxy watched. And for the first time in a very long time, old powers felt uncertain. Not because of force, but because a human had shown them a different way to hold power. By letting go, the galaxy did not change all at once. There was no single announcement, no dramatic moment where everything became different. Change came the way it often does in human history, quietly, unevenly, carried forward by small choices that refused to stop. Elias felt it before he fully understood it. He noticed it in the way meetings began. Representatives no longer arrived assuming control. They arrived prepared to talk. They asked questions instead of making demands. Some still tested him, of course, but their confidence had shifted. They no longer expected him to fold. Lurith noticed it in the silences. Silences that were no longer heavy with expectation but open. Silences where she could think, where she could speak if she chose, or not. They worked together often now, not because law demanded it, but because it made sense. Elias trusted her understanding of tradition and long-term consequence. Lurith trusted his instinct for people and fairness. Trust, she realized, was not inherited. It was built. One cycle, a delegation from a distant system, arrived without formal notice. They were not powerful, not ancient, just tired. Their trade routes had been squeezed by larger houses, their workers exhausted by impossible schedules. They asked Elias for guidance, not protection, not dominance, guidance. Elias listened. Lurith watched him as he always did, leaning forward slightly, eyes focused, hands still. He did not interrupt. He did not rush them. When they finished, he said, "You already know what you need to do. You just need someone to back you while you do it." They left with a plan and something more valuable, confidence. After they were gone, Lurith spoke quietly. "They looked at you as if you were something rare." Elias frowned. "I just listened." "Yes," she said, "that is rare." News of similar encounters spread, slowly, carefully. Smaller groups aligned themselves with the cooperative network Elias had helped build, not because it was the strongest, but because it was fair. The larger houses resisted, some openly, some quietly. They filed complaints, they questioned legality. They whispered that humans were emotional, unstable, unfit for lasting authority. Elias read every report. He did not respond with anger. He responded with transparency. Records were opened. Decisions were explained. Mistakes were acknowledged publicly. That unsettled the galaxy more than any threat ever could. Lurith began receiving messages addressed directly to her, requests for advice, invitations to speak, questions about the revised bond. "What do I tell them?" she asked Elias one evening. "The truth," he said. "That you chose," she hesitated. "Choice is dangerous." "So is fear," Elias replied. "One just feels safer because it's familiar." She thought about that long after he left the room. As cycles passed, Elias felt the weight of what Valor had done more clearly. This was never about wealth, or contracts, or even Lurith. It was about inserting something new into a system that had stopped questioning itself. Humanity, not as conquerors, but as disruptors. One quiet cycle, Elias returned to the archive alone. He stood before Valor's final recording, replaying it without sound, watching his friend's calm expression, the slight curve of amusement in his eyes. "You knew," Elias murmured. "Didn't you?" Valor had known this would be difficult, that Elias would be doubted, that Lurith would be torn between duty and self. He had also known humans would not walk away. Lurith joined him silently. "You miss him," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "Every cycle." She studied Valor's image. He believed the galaxy needed friction, not conflict, friction. Elias nodded. "Humans are good at that." Lurith smiled faintly, a real smile, unpracticed. "I think," she said slowly, "that he trusted me as much as he trusted you." Elias looked at her. "He did." Time moved on. The cooperative charter was formally recognized across multiple systems, not universally, not without resistance, but enough. Human delegates were invited into discussions once closed to them, not as symbols, as contributors. Some failed, some succeeded, all were watched closely. Elias knew this too was part of the test. One cycle, a young human liaison approached him nervously after a council meeting. "Sir, Steward Ward, I just wanted to say people are listening to us now." Elias smiled. "Good, make sure we say things worth hearing." Lurith watched the exchange from a distance. She felt something settle inside her then. Purpose. Not inherited, not imposed, chosen. That evening she joined Elias on the balcony overlooking the station, a place that had become familiar ground for shared thoughts. "The galaxy is adapting," she said. "Slowly," Elias replied. "Slow is stable," she said. "Fast breaks things," he nodded. "Humans learn that the hard way." She turned toward him. "What happens when you leave?" Elias blinked. "Leave. You are human," she said. "You do not live as long as my people or Valor S." Elias considered this. "Then I guess my job is to make sure it doesn't depend on me." Lurith was quiet. "That is wise," he smiled. "It's also a little scary." They stood together, watching ships move through the darkness like thoughts across a mind. "I am glad," Lurith said softly, "that he chose you." Elias looked at her. "I'm glad he trusted you." The bond between them remained what it had always been since it was rewritten. Not possession, not obligation, partnership, sometimes quiet, sometimes tense, always honest. In time, the galaxy adjusted its language. Humans were no longer described as emotionally unstable. They were described as adaptable, as connective, as dangerous in an unexpected way. Because they asked why. And because once they did not stop. Elias Ward never called himself a leader. Lurith never called herself bound. But together, and with many others, they reshaped something vast without ever raising a weapon or claiming a throne. Valor's legacy endured, not in wealth, not in power, but in the simple, radical idea that systems exist for people, and that humanity, small and fragile and stubborn, had something to offer the stars, not domination, but change. And the galaxy, whether it wanted to or not, would never be the same again.